This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, first-class feedback for the Federal Electronic Health Record Modernization team.
We get kind of our best input from the users themselves. We have several forums where we bring the federal EHR users forward, and we try to listen as best we can as to what makes sense. What problem are they trying to solve?
Chief Technology Officer of the firm, Lance Scott, on FedGov Today in just a moment. Uniting program strategy, advanced technology, process, and execution for a more efficient government. That's Maximus. Every program, every service, every time. That's innovation forward. Learn more at maximus.com/federal. The Federal Electronic Health Record Modernization Office calls its Seamless Exchange Initiative a critical step for data interoperability between the Defense Department and the Department of Veterans Affairs. At the ACT-IAC Health Innovation Summit this week, the Chief Technology Officer of the firm, Lance Scott, tells me Seamless Exchange is based around three principles:
deduplication, provenance, data provenance, and auto-ingestion of data. So one of the sleeper functionalities is the deduplication piece. In a lot of the pre-testing and pilot phases, they're noticing we always knew that data duplication was a problem, but not nearly as bad as we thought. We're getting rates of anywhere from 88 to 94, 96% of data deduplication. So what that does is it translates to huge cost savings in as far as hosting hardware and storage of data and everything else. The second pillar, being data provenance, is basically data goes around and is duplicated in many different locations. Every time an HIE has it, they give it to another HIE, they give it to another HIE, and then the initial question comes up: where did it start? Where did the data originate? And we've never been able to actually trace data provenance until now. And they'll be able to say, hey, some clinician in South Dakota initially put in this brain scan after an auto accident, and they're able to trace that. And the third pillar is basically something I'm most excited about, is auto ingestion. We've got inside the federal EHR, we have a purple diamond, we call it, basically that tells the clinician, hey, there's external records out there and you might want to look at them, because not only when Lance Scott goes in and sits down in front of the clinician do I pull up the data I have in the DoD stores and the VA stores, it also goes out to about 250,000 partners. So it pulls in lots of data, and that's always been a huge challenge to clinicians in overcoming that. And auto ingestion takes that data that is stored in the reconciliation process in the purple diamond, and it actually, if the functionals trust the source and trust the data domain, it'll automatically ingest that data into the record. So clinicians just have one less step. They have more data at their fingertips. We're right in the very beginning stages. VA completed a very successful pilot last November up at Walla. Because that was such a raving success, they are going on to do an enterprise-wide fielding in September of this year. DoD will be close on its heels in putting that out there. And the challenging piece that's yet to be done is we're going to have to engage the functionals early and often as to what data they will trust and what data they will put into the record, because they don't want just any data going in to clogging their record. They just got a new system. They want to keep it clean as best they can.
You mentioned the hosting cost reduction and the deduplication effort, and cloud has been an important part, obviously, of the work that you've been doing.
Absolutely.
What have you run across, either challenges or successes in that transition, and how have you addressed the challenges and leveraged the successes that you've had?
So where the light bulb came on for me as far as cloud transition, you can call it what you want if you're going to AWS or Azure or Oracle Cloud. It's all basically a cloud environment. Was back when I was PM of Defense Medical Information Systems. We transferred to the cloud one of my systems. Let's just say it had these hard, what we called adapters, that we would act as traffic cops to basically shuttle the load from one site to another. Well, I always had to pay for the hosting environment of those 14 adapters. And once I got into the cloud, I was able to take advantage of cloud native services, flexible scalability, and all of a sudden I was able to spin up and spin down resources as I needed them. I didn't have to pay for hosting that hardware in the cloud. And honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg when you talk about storage of data. We're getting ready to do a transition to the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and they're talking about upwards of 3 or 4 petabytes worth of data that they got to transfer over. That's just in the active health record. So I think the cost savings in both data and the actual physical hardware is going to be immense.
You've probably had to give a tremendous amount of thought, too, to the idea that the scale at which this is going to grow over time is beyond exponential. I mean, you're going to continue to just accumulate these huge hordes of data the way that you've described it already.
Absolutely. And that's it. There was a time years ago when our total focus was on getting more partners, more data. And now we've captured approximately 96% of the entire U.S. market that we currently exchange data with now. Now we're kind of faced with a different dilemma: is how do we make that more efficient? How do we put the actual relevant data in front of the clinicians? And our longitudinal natural language processing capability is exactly one of those products that's doing that. We're working with Military Entrance Processing Command, MEPCOM for short, in they have to scan military candidates that try to come in, and they get just deluged with tons of data from the Joint Health Information Exchange. And what we've done is we worked with them and compilated about 1,000 different exclusionary concepts, not just which drugs they're interested in looking at, but which diagnoses they're interested in looking at. Does somebody have asthma? Were they ever diagnosed with asthma? And basically what they can do is they bring in all this data. They press the MEPCOM button, as we like to call it, and it automatically scans all this data so that when the clinician has an appointment with the candidate the next day, they can say, oh, by the way, here's their record, but you probably should pay attention to these 27, 35 different documents because these contain something that you're concerned with looking at. Not only does it grab the data that might exclude a candidate, but more importantly, it allows them to start the waiver process, because many of those things that they have a qualified waiver system for that they can start and basically get the candidate over the hump to get them in. It's very exciting. It's reduced their workload by up to 80%. We just got a letter from the director of accessions the other day that was raving about the advances we made.
So your challenge over time with data is going to be curation and kind of the needle in the haystack approach for the providers more so than the collection and collation part. Is that a fair read on my part?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it shifted away from trying to get more data to trying to make more efficient use of the data, putting the correct data. Our director of the firm, Mr. Bill Tinson, always likes to say, put the right data in front of the right person at the right time. And that's really what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to sift through these mountains and mountains of data and put the exact one of the use cases that we want to employ would be, we do this thing called prefetch, where we bring in appointments for the next day and prefetch that external health data into to have it standing by so the clinician can look at it. What I'd like to do is take the subject of the appointment, lower back pain, traumatic brain injury, something like that, and do an LNLP search on that and get that into the person's record so that clinician has that much less time to spend searching for data that they're going to need anyways.
The listener's probably going, you've talked to a chief technology officer for this long and you haven't asked about artificial intelligence yet, so shame on me, but I imagine there's an AI component that is going to help your people be able to sort through that data and find what they need.
Oh, absolutely. AI has really taken this whole world by storm. One thing that I look back on my entire service in the Army and as a duty civilian, one thing that the government has not done well in the past is really be cutting edge and jump on the latest, greatest thing. I will say that I'm pleasantly surprised at how fast the DoD and VA are jumping to the forefront to handle this. They've assembled many panels to look at AI, how they're gonna govern it, how they're gonna approve things, items for use, the works. Oracle, our prime vendor for the federal EHR, is touting, they're beating the drum quite loudly about their next generation federal EHR, where they're going to have basically a digital AI assistant that's going to listen in to clinician and patient exchanges. It'll be it's going to be very advanced compared to where we see today. The clinician's going to be able to say, show me the A1C of this patient, boom, and the Oracle assistant will automatically have that up. They will also, in ambient dictation, it will also write a draft of clinical notes, because that's another thing that's plagued clinicians is having to do. They have a lot of documentation to do after hours. We call it pajama time, and this will help with that. So I think the hardest part is kind of keeping people's expectations at bay until they actually release it, because it's going to be a good 18 to 24 months before we get that out there.
Yeah, I talked to a couple of providers at the VA facility in Tampa where they've piloted a lot of these things, and they're talking about exactly that kind of thing, the potential for artificial intelligence to get providers out of the business of writing notes and looking up pieces of information and that kind of thing, especially when they're face-to-face with patients.
Absolutely.
You've mentioned a couple of technologies here, cloud and AI and large language models and so on, that are really cutting edge. How do you stay out of the business of going to look for shiny new technology to apply and looking at the problems or challenges that you're trying to solve, and then thinking about what technologies, new or old, that might be the best fit to solve them?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because one thing we don't lack for is bright, shiny ideas.
Yeah.
Everybody has something that they want to bring forward. And some of them have real merit, and I found in the past with other programs and this one is we get kind of our best input from the users themselves. We have several forums where we bring the federal EHR users forward, and we try to listen as best we can as to what makes sense, what problem are they trying to solve. We're trying to get past. Don't bring me a solution. Tell me what the root problem is. Tell me what's bothering you. Then allow the really smart engineers to figure it out. They've got a capability needs summit that DIMSUM and the VA have every month. They have another meeting that's a little bit longer every quarter where they kind of vet these ideas. They run them through the wicket and say, does it make sense? Is this something that we want? And the functionals weigh in on it and basically say, okay, every once in a while something comes through that say, hey, we really need to explore this more. And they work with their vendors and pull out basis of estimate and what they could do and what the return on investment will be.
Are there things that you think that the vendors could do to help you in that area? And are there things that you think maybe you could do better to help the vendors understand what your challenges are, so that they're not bringing you solutions, so that they're bringing you answers to problems? I
think the vendors are doing everything that they should be doing. The hardest part is just dealing with the glut of information. It's I think we've got very efficient processes in place to evaluate the myriad of unsolicited response or requests and everything else that we get. But it's dealing with the incredible influx of new ideas and try to find that one gem that will really provide value.
You can read more about the federal electronic health record modernization effort on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Revisions to 4 sections of the Federal Acquisition Regulation are on the street now as part of the response to the executive order titled Restoring Common Sense to Federal Procurement. The Office of Federal Procurement Policy and the FAR Council released updates to 4 parts already. Carla Smith-Jackson, the procurement leader at NASA and a member of the FAR Council, will tell you about what's already done and what's coming with the FAR rewrite. You can watch my conversation with her on the latest edition of FedGov Today TV. You can watch on demand anytime at fedgovtoday.com and on the FedGov Today YouTube channel. The next FedGov Today podcast is coming tomorrow. The commercial sector has some cloud lessons learned to share, and you'll learn them on tomorrow's program. You can listen to that show and every FedGov Today podcast anytime you want on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for listening.